Yeah.
Definitely.
So
Very cool.
should we get started now?
Yeah, sure.
All right.
Thomas, whenever you're ready, feel free to.
Yeah, it looks like we're live as of now,
Oh,
so
yay, cool.
I'm ready to get started.
Awesome. So everybody, I'm going to put the link into the chat one more time, especially for the folks who just joined us in the Zoom room, but this is the current YouTube link that we're streaming at. So if anyone wants to share it, feel free to do so. You're more than welcome to. And I'm just going to check out the link. Oh, yeah, cool. It does look like we're live. Yay, great. Cool. So welcome, everybody, to the May user group, the May Ableton user group, virtually, of course, for the New York Ableton user group. We're very happy to be here sharing with you as usual. We had our first user group meetup last month. I was almost going to say last week, but it's not been last week. We had it last month. And thanks, everyone, for tuning in back then. We had a lot of great feedback from that, and we appreciate all of the comments that were shared and the very great messages of support. And we have a couple more people joining us in the Zoom room. But yeah, just so everyone's on the same page, what we're doing right now is that we are streaming to YouTube from Zoom. So we're coming to you live in a way from our little Zoom room over here. If you would like to join us in the Zoom room, maybe you can leave a comment in the YouTube chat. Otherwise, we are always available here if you want to just tune in on YouTube itself. We have a really great lineup this evening. We have 3 presenters as usual. It's our usual New York user group method, if you will. And they are going to be Isaac Matus, Ricky Graham, and myself. I'm Daltrick. Hi. I'm an instructor at 343 Labs, and we're going to be doing covering some really interesting topics today across a really wide spectrum of things, from plugin development to live performance, to production as well, to the use of modular. So lots of really great things and a really wide range of topics in total. So we do hope that you'll be able to join us and stay on. I'm going to just peek over at the chat on YouTube. Hi, everyone on YouTube. Looks like we do have a couple of folks joining us as well. If you'd love to give us a shout out as to where you're watching from, that would be amazing. I'm going to type in New York since that's where most of us are from. We're typing in from New York. But if anyone else wants to share that in the chat, you're more than welcome to also. And greetings to everybody in the Zoom too. Thanks for joining us in this particular room. We're very happy to have you with us as well. One thing I did want to share about, though, is that the New York user group is, as usual, brought to you by 343 Labs. We are an institution that's based in New York usually. Obviously, now we're on the internet. But we're usually based in Manhattan in Cooper Square. That's where we teach a lot of classes for production as well as music, like songwriting, other music topics. More often than not, they're related to Ableton Live, and that's because we are an Ableton Certified Training Center. We also have a number of Ableton Certified trainers on the staff, which is really awesome. I'm one of them as well. So if you ever want to hit us up about lessons, feel free to get in touch. And I believe Thomas, who's with us, might be able to help out a little bit in the YouTube chat. He is the one replying from 343 Labs. So yay, Thomas, thanks for doing that. But otherwise, let's see if we can get started. Let's start off this evening with the wonderful Isaac. So I'm going to pass this on to you right now, Isaac, and welcome.
Hey, thank you, Claire. Thank you for the introduction. How you doing, guys? Hope everybody is doing well and safe. So my name is Isaac Matus. I am a producer, sound designer from Colombia. I live in New York City. And so, yeah, I really like electronic music and performing with hardware stuff and trying to be outside of the computer as much as possible sometimes. And so, yeah, so straight to the point today, I'm gonna talk about sort of my setup that I've been using in the last couple of weeks. I think it's worth mentioning that this setup is optimized for like at home recordings, because we're all stuck at home and it's a little too big to carry around and gig. So if this was a different, like more portable oriented setup, obviously it would be more minimal. But so yeah, I have some clips and stuff in Ableton, which I will share in a second. And but before getting into that, I'm gonna quickly browse through my hardware setup. So let me share my screen and my iPhone screen as well. Cool. Now, swing this up. Sec. So while this loads up, let me know if you guys can hear. Yeah, clear? Can you hear everything all right?
Yeah, sounds great.
Cool. As suspected, I have some latency issues, which is normal to the live stream situations. The other ones, I don't know why this is not connecting. All right, here we go.
Yeah.
Cool, so you guys can see my camera now?
Yeah, looks great.
Nice. Okay, so, and you can see my screen as well, right? My live.
So we can actually only see the devices, but that's cool. That's all right.
Okay, cool. So I'm gonna quickly browse through what I have here. So obviously my main control operation system relies on Ableton. That's where my clock comes from. And I'm sending clock via MIDI from my interface to my Roland TR-8S drum machine, which is also sending MIDI clock to my microKORG and my Mother 32, which I use for bass. I have this Arturia BeatStep Pro sequencer and controller, which is a great tool for those who want to try to have your laptop and your, I guess, your system communicate with live and with your modulars or outboard gear. It's got 2 different melodic sequencers and 8 different gate outputs, which are intended for drums and percussion. And the coolest thing about that, or the thing that I like about it the most, is that each of these each of the 8 outputs has up to 64-step sequences, which you can set to be different lengths, which is very helpful for whenever you want to do like polyrhythmic stuff, or you want to, you know, play with the grid and all the different possibilities that you can do. And it's very effortless, and it makes it effortless and creative. I have my push 1, still haven't upgraded to push 2, but it works great. Have a couple pedals. Then I have my Eurorack modular synth, and this is my roommate's modular Eurorack synth, actually. Thank you, Andres, for letting me borrow it. And so, cool. So before going through everything, let's play a little bit of what I have here. So now you can see my screen, right?
Yes, we can. That's correct. Yeah.
Great.
Awesome.
All right. So I'm gonna mute this first. So right now, I have, so what you hear is the basic, like sort of groove or coming from my TR-8S. Now, again, what I'm going to talk about today, it's specific, like this configuration is specific for what I've been performing these days in few different live streams, and just trying to explore a lot about this configuration and try to get the most out of it without messing around with it too much. And what I mean by that is, with hardware stuff and with modular in particular, it can be a little difficult for you to wrap your head around one set of configurations that can help you do different stuff, right? So what I'm trying to do with this, again, it's going to be specific to this setup and this configuration, but basically essentially the idea that builds the whole structure is what I try to use for every situation, and it works for me. So here I have all my TR-8S. You can have it to be assigned. It has a bunch of different assignable outputs. So I have my kick going to one channel, then I have my snare and my ring shot going to another channel, then I have all the toms. It has 3 toms going to my channel, and then I have hi-hats, open and close hi-hat, and ride cymbals and some percussion are going to my hi-hat track. Then I have my bass. So I have my bass here, clipping, cool. Yeah, my bass here, which is again coming from, I have my Mother 32 Moog synthesizer. It's a great semi-modular synth, which I really recommend for people who maybe try to dive into modular world, but don't want to get too crazy first and want to start with something like relatively simple and easy to learn. So yeah, the bass sequence is coming from my Beatstep Pro over here. Then I have 2 different inputs from my Eurorack synth. One of them is the one that is coming through these 2 pedals, which is a delay pedal and a phase shifter pedal. And if I'm going too fast, let me know and I can slow down a little bit. The other input, this one right here, is not coming through any pedals, which is why it's the opposite way around. This one I have some more delay and more reverb usually than the other one, because this one is coming through the pedals. So I have 2 inputs for my microKORG. One of them, it has mostly clips that I had already recorded, and the other one, the other channel for my microKORG is designated for stuff that I play during the setup. Right now, for the purpose of this demonstration, I already have a clip there. I cannot see it because of the screen share thing, but hopefully you guys can see it. So yeah, for this purpose, I already have a clip going on there, which is what I usually loop. I have this Congas, 3 clips or 4 clips, yeah. And what I do with this, in order to keep it sort of lively and more real playing kind of thing, is that I have the follow actions activated, which for those who don't know is a great way to keep a conversation kind of thing between a few different clips in one track. So what this does is that I'm telling every clip after 2 bars, go to, in this case I have it going to any other clip. And this is the probability. So if it's all the way up, it's gonna definitely go to another clip, whichever you tell it to go. And if it's all the way down, it's not gonna do it. So what I'm doing is that I have here, this is my main, I'm gonna turn it up a little bit. This is my main groove kind of thing. And so this one has, as you can see, has less probability to go to the other clips, because the other clips are the like variations and like little feelings and stuff. So my thought process behind it is, the more like outside from the regular pattern the variation is, the more probability I'm gonna give it for it to go somewhere else. That way we have, you know, that variety that variations bring, but we're still like keeping it with the main groove, you know, or like close to it. And so yeah, I have 4 different clips, and they all have different, you know, probability, like amounts of chance to go somewhere else. I have this percussion here, which is it's coming from a Colombian drum. And again, for those who may have just joined, I'm from Colombia, so I try to incorporate some stuff from my country's music and Latin America's music in general. And in this case, this is one of these. It's very subtle, you know. It just gives another, like a little bit more of movement. And I have 2 clips right now, and they're basically the same pattern, except the second one, it's like a higher dynamic. So yeah, it's more like intended for it to be during like a more climax part of the performance, while the other one is like starting. So what I tend to do, I also have this maraca, which is like some sort of shaker, you could call it. And yeah, and I have other percussion loops over here. So usually I start this set without any kick, without just the percussion basically, and even without some of the hi-hats. Right now, forgive the latency, you know how these things go. So yeah, I start with the clap. I start with my some of the high frequency percussion instruments, and as well as the congas, usually not the maracas first, and the bass. So I'm gonna turn it up a little bit so you guys can hear it without me talking. So then I would slowly bring element by element. And at some point I would just go to where I have my kick drum and other toms and that kind of stuff. And like usually I try to do like a small gesture, which with the TR-8S you can easily do with the autofill option. So there I'm going. Yeah, I like to, open the filter in the bass every once in a while. Cool. So now let me go to the modular aspect of it. I'm gonna switch back to my iPhone camera for the moment. Let's see. Cool. So here I have, as I said, BeatStep Pro, which is sending melodic and triggers, melodic information as sequences to my bass and triggers to the gate to let us hear that. I'm gonna talk about that more in depth in a moment. And then I have my modular, which I have 8 voices total. So one of them is this oscillator. It's a 2 output oscillator, wavetable oscillator. It's called Cloudterranium by Synthesis Technology. It's amazing. I love this guy over here. Then I have Plights. It's by Mutable Instruments. This is like it's a great like all-around module again for people who may want to start getting into modular and want to have a oscillator that brings a lot of possibilities to the table, this one's got 16 different algorithms, all the green ones, and you can easily switch between both of the groups that it offers. So the green one, it's got a wavetable, it's got a vocal synthesis algorithm, a chord, harmonic oscillator, all sorts of stuff. And then you can toggle to the red group, which has physical modeling algorithms, it has percussion algorithms, it has kick, snare, drum, cloud algorithms, all kinds of stuff as well. So yeah, without getting too deep into this, I'm just gonna play a little bit of what I have. So yeah, something that I like to do, and I'm sure a lot of people who like to play sets with modular gear can agree with this, is you want to patch almost nothing, or like the least amount of stuff as possible. So you want to try to have a strategy that helps you have a system and a configuration that you can make changes quickly and with very few button pressing and very few patching and unpatching. So in my case, one way to give me a possibility with this is like, I have the Arturia Beatstep Pro. I'm sending, for example, a melodic sequence to this guy, the Cloud Tyrannium, which sounds like this. Let me turn it up a little bit. I know I said that I usually like to not patch, but this is the one thing that I like to patch and unpatch in this case, because this module right here is it's called Prism by Qubit. It's an amazing filter, and it has some sort of delay and comp filtering kind of thing. And so, sorry about that. And so it's got this freeze input where you can either freeze it manually or send it CV to freeze. So it's gonna freeze the delay and feedback. And I'm sending it a random voltage. Anyways, so yeah, let's unplug this for now. And so what I'm doing here is I have a melodic sequence coming from the Arturia Beatstep Pro into here. But let's say that I don't want to play this sequence as it is all the time, right? So I have this module right here. It's called the VCA Matrix, which it's a VCA where you can send up to 4 different voices, but you can give it, all of those voices can be manipulated by up to, I believe, 16 different CV inputs. So in this case, I have the same melody, which is coming from here. It's this guy right here. So again, this is the full melody. But I have, if I can quickly toggle and activate it or deactivate it right here. So to this represents another CV input, which is being provided by my Beatstep. So I have one of these 8 trigger outputs is going here, right? And I can have, so I have 2 different rhythms kind of toggling the same melody, which that means is that I can either have the full melody as it is or bits of it. And I can, that it helps to give some momentum to the piece. You can start kind of telling the listener, hey, let's check this out, keep it in your mind, and at some point, I'm gonna bring the whole thing, right? Obviously, I'm not really performing right now. I'm just kind of showing you what I can do with that. And I could technically have other CVs alter like manipulating this here, but I like to keep a few slots open for, you know, whatever I can do if I want to configure it differently. So yeah, back to the TR8S. You know, it's a very helpful tool for you to perform intuitively. What I do a lot is mute and unmute, and I'm sure a lot of people have the same approach. I have stickers here that help me kind of understand where my levels are for the most part. So yeah, so back to the modular. I also have my plates, same principle. I'm sending it, in this case, the melody is coming from Stages, which is a module. It's a envelope, it's a segment generator module, which that means that you can have up to 6 different modulators or like sources of modulation through control voltage, and a variety of combinations of envelope generators. So this, I don't know if you can see very well on that, but it's got each of the 6 different outputs and modulation sources are being triggered by external, whatever external CV I send it to. And you can either have 6 independent modulation sources or have it being like one massive envelope generator with you know, attack, sustain, decay. In this case, because it's 6 different steps, you can have up to 2 different hold moments in your envelope generator, right? So again, same principle here. I can toggle easily between this rhythmic structure for my melody and this other one. In this case, they're kind of similar, but you know, for example, I think this is a better example for it. Right now, my input is this noise module, which I use this more for like gestures in order for me to transition between a section and another one. And so I don't know if you can see, but this would be the CV input for this audio input, which in this case, there's nothing on it. So it just comes through as it, you know, as it comes in. It comes out as it comes in. But in this other CV input, I have and you have, you know, the attenuators, so you can control the amount of CV that you send. This one's got more rhythmic stuff happening, right? So if I wanted to say that this is my main element in a particular section of the track, let me bring it up a little bit, and I'm gonna just use the other one, the input without any CV, manipulating it to kind of help me do a gesture with it, with the same sound. So I'm gonna turn it up a little bit. So I have it on. And the cool thing about this module is that you can, like, it's very smart in that it kind of detects the amount of attenuation you are giving to each input. So it kind of blends in both of the CV input that's receiving, and yeah, it's really good to mix those, you know, in that way. So right now, for example, I just got slowly getting rid of the rhythmic part of it, and now we just hear the noise as it comes in. So for my plights, my kind of strategy behind it is that for the beginning of the set, I usually have it in this other algorithm, like the more percussive one, so with just the toggle of one button, I have something completely different. I go from percussive, more sound designy material to straight sort of melodic material just by toggling. That can happen. So with this one, I spent some time like tuning in the knobs so that I could find a sweet spot that works for both algorithms. And that's one of the things that can take, some time when you're trying to, and obviously there's some sort of commitment to it, right? So initially this patch was sounding a little different. I had my knobs were tweaked somewhat different, but then whenever I went to the other algorithm, to the rhythmic, to the percussive one, it would not work quite the same, So I had to commit to certain things and not sacrifice, but compromise maybe some details that you really want to, but hey, if you want to have the option of toggling back and forth and having it work, then this is, probably the easiest way to do it.
Well, Isaac, we actually had a bunch of questions coming from YouTube, so if maybe we
sure.
can wrap up and then we can take a couple of the questions.
Yeah, absolutely. So very quickly, my other two voices are this micro braids, which is a redesign, smaller redesign of a discontinued module by Mutable Instruments called Braids, and it's by a company called Tall Dog Electronics. It's an amazing module. Same principle. I'm using this as my main sorts of, different varieties in rhythmic and melodically speaking. So I have it here, very spiky, very like tight, and here's just the whole thing coming through. I'm using this voltage block, which is an amazing CV sequencer. It's very performative. It's got up to 16 steps, and you can loop between them. And let me show you some searches. So you see, I'm just pressing 3 of the steps in the sequence, and it's gonna loop between those 3. Yeah, I have this other. Oh, sorry about that. This other module, the C3000. It's an oscillator, and I'm sending in CV information from my voltage block to the linear FM input, and I just keep it on right here, but I'm just bringing it slowly with this filter that I've got right here, and it's a low pass filter. I have it as a low pass filter, and it's another like sort of voice that I use for transitions. So yeah, I guess sort of to wrap up, what I have right here is 2 voices that are like the main melodic and rhythmical content, and the rest of the stuff that I have, it's used mainly for transitions and other details that sort of come through. Yeah. It's kind of hard to cover everything in such a short period of time, but I guess that could give you an idea, and maybe open for some questions if we want to move to that part.
Yeah, sounds great. Let's do the questions. Thanks so much, Isaac. This is great.
Thank you.
Yeah. Nice fade out.
So,
very cool.
Let me switch to my. Cool. All right.
Yeah,
so any
awesome.
questions?
We do have questions. Thomas, did you want to field them, or I can put them in either, whichever.
Sure.
Yeah.
So we had a couple questions about the setup, it looks like, from the YouTube chat. So the first one is the hardware attached mainly used for performing, or at least given the current setup? Is it a performance-based setup, would you say?
Yes, I mean, so that's a great question because obviously it's meant for performance, but since I'm at home and I'm recording constantly and working on music, it's also for me it's been also a great way to it's like a compositional device in a way. If you wanna get into dance in this case, like more dance oriented tracks, it's really helpful for me to you know basically compose the track as I configure the live setup, and that way it feels more satisfying and smoother to when it comes to like, okay, I'm laying down the track. I already have an idea of the arrangement in my head, right? And I think it brings some life to the arrangement and the track when you actually perform it. So yeah, it's performance oriented, but it can be a good tool for like composing and producing.
Awesome. So another question we had was about your interface. So what kind of audio interface are you using, and do you deal with much delay? I know we're in a like a live stream situation, which causes for some more latency, but how do you kind of compensate for the delay you're getting or syncing up with live?
Mm-hmm. So my interface is a Focusrite Scarlett Focusrite 18IA. It's a great interface, sounds good, and it's not very expensive, so it's something that I recommend. It has a MIDI output as well, so it's very helpful to send solid. In my case, it has worked better than USB. So if I wanted to send sync and like MIDI clock to my TR-8S, that's what I use. And yes, obviously with this whole live stream situations, we are very prone to have delays. In my case, especially because I incorporate both live clips and outboard gear. The issue is not so much in the outboard, it's like how those two communicate. Because if I don't have any clips playing from Ableton, I may have some delay, but everything is, sort of in the same, it has the same amount of latency. But when I bring the clips from live to the table, that's when we start to have issues. And the way I deal with it is just, with this, in live, in the preferences, in MIDI, I have my MIDI output from my Scarlett interface.
Ooh, so Isaac, sorry, for the MIDI output thing, you may have to reshare your screen and share the preferences thing.
Okay. Cool. It might be just faster, I guess.
Yeah, sure. You can just tell us too. That's all right.
Yeah, in the live preferences in the MIDI section, you can set the output of your interface. If you click on the arrow, it brings a drop down menu where you can manipulate the MIDI clock sync delay. So right now I have it at minus 12 milliseconds. And how I do it is just hit play. It sounds completely out of phase. It sounds like there's a bunch of latency, and I start going down until it sounds right. And that's how I manage.
Gotcha.
To do it. Yeah.
Cool. And then one other one we had was kind of brings up a classic debate, but somebody said, since you can replicate things like these hardware they have in front of you inside the DAW, what's the main purpose of using all the hardware? So maybe talk about why you choose to go with the outboard.
Yeah. Well, that's a great question, and I think there can be multiple answers for it. Starting with the most philosophical one, I guess. For me, it's a very, for me, like the relationship that the human can get to develop with the machine, it's as intimate as the one that you can develop with any other acoustic or like traditional instrument. The fact that you are manipulating voltage, for me, it may be, you can call it a romantic reason, but it is, it is nice. And obviously the bandwidth and the quality and the warmth of it, and like you can replicate it obviously, and you have amazing VSTs out there. But yeah, same thing with any other digital versus hardware scenario. Like you can replicate it to be really close to it, and it's going to be easier for you, but you're never going to have that sound. And then again, just the fact that you're dealing with straight with voltage, and also the way that you can have everything intermingled in a way that's very unique, and brings you a whole new set of sonic possibilities that it might be a little harder and more tedious in the computer, in my personal experience.
Got you. I think Embedo in the YouTube chat said a good quote that might kind of resonate with you and some of the other hardware users. It says, "You'll never understand why people have a ton of outboard gear until you actually get to use it for yourself."
Yeah.
Experience of really, once you kind of start getting into it, it's hard to take it away.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's something that every module synth head is gonna tell you, don't do it. But we all love, we all love it. But if you have the possibility, if you get the chance, as I said earlier, maybe for the ones who just tuned in, I'm very thankful to one of my professors at school, because he was the one who helped me and other students to get into this stuff by, letting us borrow some of his modules and even selling them for a more affordable price. So if you can get used stuff and get to it, and you want to do it, it's something that calls you, go for it. I mean, it's one approach to electronic music and music in general.
Gotcha. Awesome.
Yeah. So I don't know if there's any more questions or if we have more time.
Yeah, we had one more question from someone in the chat in Zoom, which is actually going to be covered by me later, because I'm going to be talking about follow actions. But Isaac, if you just want to pull up very quickly that launch box, just so that we can highlight it a little bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this, for the person in the chat who is asking, this is the section where you would edit all of these. And I'll be talking more about these later on in my presentation too. So yeah, it's going to be the launch box, the launch section of your clip view.
Yeah. So do you want to cover it, or should I?
Oh, that's okay. I can work on it. But this is great. No, thanks for circling that. Awesome. Cool. For everybody, if you could give Isaac a round of applause, please. Very cool. Thanks so much, Isaac, for presenting. Yay.
Thank
cool. I'm going to mute you. Yay. Cool. And thanks everyone on YouTube for tuning in. We had a couple of folks also join in as well. So Isaac, if you don't mind stopping your screen share, that'll be awesome. Thank you. Yeah, awesome. Thanks also for the neat chat comments as well. That was indeed very cool. We had some nice reaction emojis from everyone in the chat also. So thanks everyone for tuning in. Again, this is the New York Ableton user group. Just wanted to say hi to everybody who's in the chat on YouTube and also in Zoom. We had a couple of new folks also just pop into the Zoom as well as on YouTube. So thanks everyone for tuning in. Our next presenter that we have is none other than Ricky Graham. So I'm going to unmute Ricky for... Oh, Ricky's unmuted. Yay!
I've just been really quiet.
That's awesome. Hi, Ricky. So
hey, how's everybody doing? Hopefully not too bad. I'm going to go ahead and share screen. Can you see okay?
Yeah, it looks great.
All right, let me just do a quick line check.
Yeah, no problem.
Gonna give us something good. Is that coming through okay?
Yeah, sounds great.
All right, cool. All right, everybody. Hi, my name is Ricky. I'm currently in Cleveland, Ohio. Not the beautiful picture behind me, which is the west coast of Ireland, where I used to holiday when I was a kid. But anyway, yeah, I run a company called Delta Sound Labs, and we make software plugins. We were in the modular world for a little bit there this past year, as per Isaac's presentation. We did make Eurorack here for a little while, but we've since pivoted over to just focus on software plugins moving forward. So what I want to talk about today, I'm a live trainer as well, similar to Claire. I've been a live trainer for, maybe nearly 10 years, like 2010, 11, something like that. It's been a while.
Happy anniversary.
I don't know when the anniversary is exactly, but I know it's not too far off that mark.
Nice.
So it's been a while. Anyway, very nice to meet you all. And what I hope to talk about today is a little bit about what we do, a little bit about why Ableton and Max for Live specifically are really useful for rapid prototyping and plugin development. And I know a lot of you are probably Max wizards, so I'll be covering very basic stuff by compared to your knowledge set, I'm sure. But this is more for the beginners, those of you who are coming to Live for the first time, or maybe you've been using Ableton for a long time and you're interested in, you know, getting into programming. And I think Max is a great gateway to that. And actually, we just released the plugin that you're looking at right now. It's called Stream, and it was prototyped inside of Ableton, inside of using Max and PD to some degree. And you know, Ableton was a very conducive environment for building a plugin like this for a whole bunch of reasons. But I'll just play back some audio. Claire, let me know if levels are okay. I can adjust here as need be. So Stream's a granular sampler. It allows you to, you know, grab an audio sample, you can drop it right in, and you can start creating big textures from little tiny bits of sound. So I'm sure some of you are already familiar with this kind of synthesis. So you can create up to 16 voices. You can play it back pretty linearly. Change the grain size on the fly. You can write down at 20 milliseconds all the way through to 1 second. Oh, is the I'm using loopback, so yeah.
Okay, cool.
That a little bit better?
Yeah, lots better.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah, thanks for keeping me right. Yeah, so we've got a multi-channel granular sampler plugin. It runs in Live as an AU. You can grab it and try it pre-authorization from our website, deltasoundlabs.com. If you're into sound design or anything like that as well, it's a useful tool for that kind of thing. My goal here is just give you a quick overview, show you how you can use some MIDI clips to control it too inside of Live, and then I'm going to make a patch from scratch in Max. And feel free to patch along if you have Ableton open, if you have Suite or access to Max MSP, for example, or Max, as it's called these days. Yeah, just patch along with me if you like. So sampling generally is something that's interested me for a long time, and you know, Ableton was really the reason for that. You know, one of its founders, Henke, for example, is a big user of this kind of synthesis, and that was a huge inspiration to me. And if you haven't checked out his work, particularly in the Max for Live realm, you should go check out his granulator device. It's very, very cool. So I just thought I'd give that a mention too. So yeah, this is Stream. That's a little bit of what it sounds like. You could do a couple of other things that are pretty interesting here. We can do a lot of kind of like pseudo time stretching with it as well. So you can kind of, it might actually help to introduce a little bit of jitter here. These voices. And you can play it back at 1 speed, kind of get a sense of the original sample. Change the window type. We have 2 cueable windows. You've got this triangle, which is more open. Much fuller sound. Cueable Gaussian, which is really pretty nice for creating more space and textures, and cueable noise as well. Which is nice for nice to create sizzles on like hi-hats and things like that. If I bring us down and make it a little bit more linear as well, what we can do is play with a spread. We have all the spread control to change the phase overlap, so you'll see that. I just make the buffer size a little smaller. And have like 2 repeating grains, and you can change the overlap, and that's basically just how much of the buffer is being read. We can treat this like a VSTI as well, and that's where Ableton's really wonderful. And actually, Ableton we used as probably our most prominent test environment when we were making the plugin. For example, we would use this with MIDI tracks inside of Live to drive it, repitch the audio as well. So you can do that monophonically. It's pretty good for creating large pedal points. So if you have like up to 16 voices, you can use a MIDI track in Live. You can use MIDI to find the track that you're on and I'm just going to use my, I'm sure all of you know this at this point. Drag our bits out of it for a minute. I'm just going to use my computer keyboard to drive a little MIDI to it. You could repitch all the grains at the same pitch, so by default it's kind of in a monophonic. That's really nice for creating granular textures. Or you can treat it like a conventional VSTI as well, where you can treat it like a polyphonic instrument where you, as you play MIDI data in live through a MIDI track like this. I guess this would be equivalent to like a MIDI controlled audio effect in Logic, if you're familiar with Logic. But this is how I would achieve it in Ableton. So when Poly switched on, you can use polyphonic MIDI data to create voices. And if you have the ability to generate 16 MIDI notes at one time, our plugin can handle that. Anyway, so that's a little bit of Stream. And it was, very much, Ableton was very much a part of the development process for this plugin. And I just wanted to kind of demo what that rapid prototyping might look like inside of Max for live. So let's dig into that. And again, if you're interested in checking it out, you can grab the plug and try it pre-off from deltasoundlabs.com. But anyway, how would I build something like this inside a Max? As I'm sure some of you know, on the browser on the left-hand side under Max for Live, you have the ability to build your own, MIDI effects, instruments, and audio effects. And a good starting point for any of you that are starting out in this world and interested in kind of digging deeper into synthesis generally, understanding it at a much more granular level, you might have a look at some of the existing tutorials in Max for sure, but you might consider just starting with one of the templates inside of Live itself. So I'm just going to create a basic sampler and then talk through some of the considerations that you might kind of go through as you're building this thing. Let me see, there we go. And as you can see, we've got these two little objects, plug in, plug out, which allows us to grab audio from Live and spit it back out again into Live. So you can build a process in between. So I'm going to open up my Max Patcher. I'll just check in with Claire, make sure you can still see the Max Patcher window. Yeah? Yep.
Yep, that's right. Yeah.
Okay, great. Cool. So the first thing with, for those of you who haven't used Max for Live before, it's a graphical programming language. So it's not textual. It's not, you're not having to learn a syntax that's maybe a little bit nebulous. I think Isaac was talking about Eurorack before and connecting, you're connecting physical wires to modules, right? So this is kind of the virtual equivalent to that. Think of it like that. And so what I really love about it is that you have the ability to create what are called objects. And then each object has a particular function, right? So you think about this in the same way you think about signal flow in a production. You would think about the input to output stage and everything in between. The sky's the limit. Whatever you can creatively come up with is really, up to you and what you can imagine. And I just wanted to create a basic sampler and show how that might be doable. And anything I build here, I'll share after the fact as well. To get started, getting audio into a buffer to manipulate is probably the first port of call when it comes to designing a sampler. And you can do that pretty easily inside of Max just by using a little object called buffer that allows you to store audio. And so each of these objects, you'll notice it has a little tilde after it. If it's got a little tilde after its object name, it's dealing with audio specifically. That's the main distinction inside of Max. If it doesn't have that, it's probably dealing with something more at message rate. So let's get some audio into this thing. What I love about Max as a gateway into development generally is that it has built-in user interface objects. And those user interface objects allow you to build a user interface immediately, pretty quickly. And so we can create a little drop file box here. And that drop file box is going to basically allow us to drag on, like drag and drop, similar to the Stream plugin I just showed where I could drag a sample onto the plugin. When we drag an audio file onto this, it'll allow me to store that, and then I can manipulate that audio sample in real time. I'm just going to build out the patch here and show you what it does. So I'm creating what are called messages right now. And those messages will show me what kind of, it's a nice way to kind of see what how these objects actually operate. So let me just grab a sample from my desktop, my very messy desktop. And as I hover over here, you'll see that it spits out the audio file location. And that's all I need to get it to store in the buffer. Fortunately, I can connect it up here, connect it up here. And if I were to repeat that process one more time and open up my little buffer here, like control, oh, that's the help file, which we'll talk about in a minute, which is actually a great way to learn. You can see that the MP3 is now stored in this little buffer. So that's good. That means we got some audio in a buffer. We got it in a place that we can store and manipulate it and so on. You'll notice I conveniently, I'll go with conveniently, opened up the help file. Every single object, and this is where Max is great. If you don't know what it does, if you're learning this stuff for the first time, you can just right click on it and go to the help file or the reference, and you can learn about it. You can read about how it functions. It's typically tabbed and pretty thorough. What I love about the help files for Max is that you can actually edit, open them up, edit them, and cut them, reverse engineer them, and hack them into your own thing. So it's actually how I learned. I just learned by reverse engineering a bunch of Max patches and PD patches. And that was after years of just saying, I don't want to learn how to code. I just want to play my guitar. And the rest is history. So graphical programming for me was the way into learning how to, code and develop software. So yeah, we've got a little bit of audio in here. Let's get some audio happening back out in Ableton because we don't want to just look at stuff. We want to be able to hear it. So plug out basically allows us to create audio connections and spit, that audio sample back out into Ableton. So what we're going to do is use another little object called Groove. What Groove's going to do is it's going to read the contents of this buffer. But before we do that, we need to give our buffer a name. And we can just call it whatever, literally. We can just call it whatever. And we just need to tell Groove to say, hey, Groove, just read whatever. So whatever's stored in here, which currently is nothing. Okay, I lied. I'm going to go just drop this back in one last time. And we can connect up Groove to our, let's put in a 2 argument here for make it stereo. Yeah, all right. And we're going to create another little object. And you can see this is all like a connection, essentially a network similar to the network of modules that Isaac created using his Eurorack setup. And each one's influencing the other. So we're going to create another little object called SIG. And it's just creating a basic signal. It's like a control signal. And we're going to use that to read through our Groove, or to use Groove to read through our buffer effectively. And I'm going to give it a value of 1. And actually, yeah. And then hopefully you can see it's coming through on 1 channel right now, which is, okay, so this should be. So can you hear that? Is that coming through? All right, cool. All right, so I loaded in the sample. There you go. We got it playing. So what? Who cares, right? I can do that by dragging in a clip in the Ableton. So it's really not that interesting until we start. So apparently I don't need this here for that right now. If I start playing around with values in between 0 and 1, things can get a little bit more interesting. So what happens if I play it back at 0.2? I can play it at, kind of have that tape slowdown effect. I can start playing back things very quickly and shifting the pitch. This is what got me interested in learning how to use Max, because I was like, I want to be able to manipulate audio in different ways that Ableton can't yet. And again, that's what Max affords. Max affords you the opportunity to build the tools that don't exist yet for the platform, right? So a nicer way to do this effectively would be to make a slider. And you can do that just by pressing S on the keyboard. And this is what we would call very similar to the Dropbox. It's a user interface object or UI object. And we're going to use this slider to control the speed and direction. And I'm going to hold Command and I as a nice little shortcut. And in this, I want to do output a float. I want the range to be -1 to 1. So that's a range of 2, right? And so we want the minimum to be -1. So this is similar. I mean, again, just setting attributes of a particular object and how it works inside of Max. And if I connect it up to this little float box here, you'll see we now have a slider that when I click and drag it around, it has this range of -1 to 1. That sample sounds kind of cool at that slow speed. But if I want it to be more interactive, I can connect this up. And now when let's put this number box in so you can see it at both ends. I start dragging this around. I can start playing around with, the 0 is going to effectively stop. It's like your tape has stopped. Anything in the negative range is going to play backwards. So we're already having fun, I hope. I am, at least. So there you go. That's a little quick intro to how you can get audio into a buffer and start manipulating it. Now I am starting to think about, if this was actually a usable device, what is it missing? And, having the ability to switch things on and off, is one thing. Thinking about how I would want to be able to manipulate the audio in real time. So do I want to be able to play backwards and forwards? Yes, probably. That would be kind of cool. Just even controlling volume. Like there's a lot of like live-based GUI things going on. Like there's live.gain, which allows you to, just use the kind of conventional Ableton-looking volume control. And you can, now I can turn things up and down inside the device. All right, so I made this, weird little sampler thing that allows me to drop audio in and change the direction and speed. So that's kind of neat. But it's still this mess of wires. And do we need to save it? I guess we do, real quick. So NYC meetup. And I'll make this available after for anybody that's interested. So effectively what I want to do here is just expose the UI elements and hide everything else, because the rest is kind of unappealing to look at and it's not very useful in a functional sense, especially when we get it back into Ableton and start looking at this thing. So I'm going to do a couple of things. And again, this is all really well documented in the Max docs. So you go check it out in your own time. Plenty of tutorials online. I think there's some like, free MOOC style courses on Max as well available that you can check out. There's a ton of stuff out there. So, there's plenty of resources. I'm going to right click on this and add it to presentation. I want this slider. I'm going to add this to presentation. And I'm going to add this as well. I'm going to add it to presentation. And then I'm going to go up here and I'm going to right click on just this darker gray area and click inspector window. And I'm going to make sure that my device opens in presentation. And then I'm going to save my device. And I'm going to click on this little presentation mode button. And like magic, all the wires disappear and we're left with the UI bits that we need. And you're probably thinking, it would be nice to see the waveform, wouldn't it? Right, well, let's do that then. So if I press N and type waveform tilde and give it a little message and type buffer name. And then what did I call this thing? Whatever. Okay, so whatever. And we'll call it that. And what do you know? There it is. There's the waveform. And I'm just going to add that to presentation too. Save it. And then I'll pop this in here. And then you can play around with like how you want to lay it out. You can just drag things around. Think about it from a user perspective, what makes sense left to right. in Western culture at least, tend to associate the input stage at the left-hand side and the output stage at the right. Maybe that makes sense. In terms of workflow, I'm going to be dropping the sample, manipulating it, and then maybe controlling volume. So maybe this layout's actually okay for right now. What I love about Max, again, is that you can resize all this stuff. So if you got your little drop area, if that's fine for you, you can add a comment as well, you know, drop audio here, underneath here. You can resize that little box. And then we can resize our slider to kind of match that. You can change the color, all that stuff. It's all pretty cool. Now when I save that, if you look at my Ableton window, something has changed. When I close Max and go back to Ableton, I'm left with this device. I'm left with, you know, well, in this case, it's a Max audio effect. I think if I wanted to use MIDI to control this thing, I probably would have picked the Max instrument template, and then I could have used MIDI to also drive some of the processes as well. But let's just make sure it's working. So again, I'll just grab a sample real quick from my desktop and drop it in. There we go, we got our sample. And we're not getting audio. And the reason for that, and that highlights a good point as well, we have no ability currently to, well, that's actually pretty interesting. Why didn't it play back? Let's see. I don't know if it's anything to do with the stream or whatever, but yeah, it's kind of wild.
Could be. There's always some strange magic sometimes that happens.
There is a little bit, yeah. I mean, the code's fine. I don't know what's going on as far as I can tell.
Also. So
yeah, it's not a big deal.
just,
I mean,
yeah.
if you give us a shot on your machine when you're not streaming on Zoom, it'll probably work fine. Yeah. It was working. You all saw it. There's recorded evidence. All right, cool. Let's just try. Well, this is open again, so I need to drag this in. There we go. We get some audio again. Yeah, there's just silly little initialization things. When you open it, it may lose the audio, for example. So just dragging it back in should help. So how am I doing for time, Claire? Because I did want to patch a little more, but if I'm kind of getting
we can also move on to some questions because we actually had one interesting one that kind of came up in the chat. If you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. I mean, honestly, questions are better than me talking, frankly.
Yeah, no, it's all good. I'm sure everyone would love to listen. We had an interesting one from Martin in the Zoom, not on the YouTube. But what is the difference between, because you mentioned you used PD before. So what's the difference between PD and Max? And is there like a benefit as to one of them? Because he's interested in a lot of generative music research.
Oh, nice. Yeah, it's an interesting story that I think people in the cycling, in fact, plenty of people in the Ableton community could speak to this as well. But PD and Max their origins are very similar. I guess the short version might be Pure Data is open source and free. It's much, in some ways, more vanilla than Max. I think today, under the hood, they're a little bit different, but they started as basically a part of the same project, spearheaded by the likes of Miller Puckett and David Ziccarelli. Max being David's thing, PD being Miller's thing. Miller is the man behind Pure Data specifically, and I guess it's very commonly used in academia. It looks, in fact, I can just show you what it looks like. You know, there's a lot of similarities between the two. You know, if you can't afford Ableton and Max, then sure, PD is a great place to start. But it's effectively the same kind of graphical programming language where you can create a patcher. You know, it's based on those same kind of metaphors, canvas, using a canvas, objects that do things. So instead of like cycle tilde, you might use OSC tilde. Still use the same kind of DAC. So a lot of the objects are the same. A lot of the plain vanilla C code under the hood might be similar. Probably pretty much, you know, not exactly the same. There are definitely some structural differences, but, you know, there are a lot of similarities there. It's not integrated. You know, you can't integrate it too well within, you know, there are wrappers and things that exist out there that allow you to run like within a plugin. Pierre Guillot had a project where you can load PD patchers inside of a VST called Chamomile or Chamomile, depending where you're from. And you know, there are ways to kind of like wrap it and use it inside of Ableton that way. And I actually use both all the time. Like when I'm like, you know, we run a certified training center in Cleveland, and when we're teaching Ableton, we always use Max. I mean, there's no doubt. I mean, that's just what it makes sense to use Max, because it's just the integration is wonderful. And of course, if you want to do like, you know, any kind of video work inside of Ableton, you can do that. You know, you can start with Visi and work your way towards Jitter as well. So I mean, there's a lot of really great options with Max. I kind of feel like both have their strengths. They also have a lot of similarities across the board. You know, their origins are it's a really cool origin story, and then they've kind of diverged a lot in recent years. But both communities are really useful. I don't recommend one over the other too much. I think they're both great, and I think you should try them out for sure. And I think whomever asked the question, I mean, you mentioned academic research, like you'll see Max and PD used in academia pretty frequently. So yeah,
Oh,
good
awesome.
question.
Thanks, Ricky. Yeah, so they said they'll be in touch with you in the chat.
Yeah,
awesome.
no
Cool.
worries. Yeah, reach out. So I built a little patch here, and if it's useful and it looks cool, I did have like a little further addition, but I probably don't have time for that. But I'm happy to share it with anybody. Just send me an email. My personal email is info@rickygraham.net. I can type that into the chat too. But yeah, might be a good stopping point.
Yeah, that would be great. Actually, Ricky, I do have one more question, and this time it's for me. But
okay.
As far as like Delta Sound Labs goes, what was the very first Max for Live device that you made?
What was the first what?
The first Max for Live device that you made.
That I made?
Yeah.
Oh God.
I feel like it's interesting. I often ask a lot of Max.
That's a good question.
Like, how do you start? You know.
No, you know, just on the topic of academia, I did use it a lot for creating. Oh, that's not a thing. It's .com.
I think it's .com. Yeah.
Yep. I used it for like I was really into like motion capture devices and like building augmented instruments. Like I came from that kind of NIME world where you were building kind of trying to build novel interfaces, whether it did or not, and augmenting instruments and that kind of thing. We have a little page on here actually, because we shared a lot of. I thought we did. Hopefully they didn't. They're there. Okay. When we're prototyping stuff, like we'll make it a Max and release it for free, and people can tell us, you know, it's customer discovery, you know, just to be frank about it. I mean, we're trying to get a sense of people, whether people need the things and whether they care about them. And if they like it, they can use it and tell us what they would love to see in like a product or something. And Max, like I have actually Helmholtz is a really good kind of PD Max crossover, because Helmholtz is actually a pitch tracker that's not native to Max initially. It was made for Pure Data by Katja Vetter. She's a wonderful DSP programmer. Amazing, like her work is incredible. And she made a really immaculate pitch tracker for monophonic pitch tracking. So Ed and I ported it to Max so we could build a Max for Live device using it. So any instrumentalists amongst you that are interested in controlling oscillators like operator or wavetable with the pitch of your voice or guitar or something like that, try our Helmholtz Max for Live device. It's free and a ton of fun. We also made a Resay filter, which actually was a adaptation of one of our co-founders, John Harding, at the time, had built this nice series of sweeping bands that you could cue and sync to the set. So I redesigned the UI for that, and you can also get that for free. So yeah, just those aren't the first devices, Claire, but those are some that are worth checking out.
Awesome.
I think, yeah, these are maybe my first. I don't know if this shows the date, but this is 2012. I guess that's not that long ago. But 8 years ago, I wrote this thing, and it uses your camera and you're just using pixel data to, you know, basically as a control device. And if any of you have a Nintendo Wii lying around, the Wiimap device may or may not work.
That's awesome.
It has not been maintained. It did use some externals. This is before the Max MSP Ableton merger, but
Very cool.
But yeah, check them out. And if you got any questions, you can get me on my Delta email, which is ricky@deltasoundlabs.com. Oops. That's it.
Cool.
Alrighty.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ricky.
Oh, no worries. A real pleasure. Thanks all.
Round of
Cheers.
applause for him, please, in the,
Yep.
in the Zoom and on YouTube and everywhere. Thanks so much. But yeah,
Welcome.
thanks also everyone for tuning in. We are at the Ableton user group for New York. Welcome everybody who's in Zoom. I just saw a couple of people pop in, a couple of people filter out also, and also in the chat as well on YouTube. Welcome everyone, and thanks for staying around. So far we've had Isaac Matus and Ricky Graham present for today. And we have one more presenter left, and that's me. So I guess I'll get started. Hi, everyone. My name is Claire. I also go by Daltrick. That's my artist name. But most importantly, perhaps, I am an instructor at 343 Labs. And 343 Labs is currently hosting this particular user group. So I'm going to talk a little bit about it afterwards. But I thought first maybe I'll just keep the flow going and move on to what I'm going to share with everyone today. And that is about follow actions in Ableton Live. So this is kind of related in a way. My presentation that I'm going to share about is going to be pretty brief, but it's related to both what Ricky said and also what Isaac shared, a couple of things related to Mac stuff, but also related to follow actions and the idea of working with clips. So if you're hearing about the term follow actions for the very first time, do not worry. Oftentimes people don't actually know it for the very first foray into Ableton Live that they're making. And that's because it's hidden a little bit away in a certain part of Live's session view. So just so everyone's on the same page, again, as usual, we have two views in Live. We have session that's laid out vertically, and then we have arrangement that's laid out horizontally. But in session over here, if we look at the device view or the clip view at the bottom of Ableton Live, there's this little toggle over here that looks like an L shape that is sometimes dimmed, and it hides away what's called a launch box in Ableton Live. Now, the reason why I'm saying all of this is because this is extremely important for dealing with follow actions. And what exactly are follow actions? Follow actions are controls in Ableton Live that let you create chains of clips that can trigger each other in random ways or in an orderly fashion if you want to be able to do that. So for that matter, that's what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to speak about follow actions in general, how you might be able to use them in your live sets, some creative ways that are a little bit more quote unquote traditional, and some other ways that are maybe a little bit more out of the box that I consider maybe a little bit off, off the usually treaded path. But a clip's follow action, when we talk about follow actions, a clip's follow action is what defines its behavior or what happens to other clips that it works with in the same group of clips that it's playing in. So all of these little clips that you see over here in Live, everybody, and also just so everyone knows, I've got a push next to me in my setup as well. But all of these clips that you see over here in Ableton Live at the moment, I have them loaded up on a track that's colored orange, and all of these are orange clips. All of these are set to, first of all, they're set to loop. And second of all, they are all set with different follow actions. And how do I know that they're set with different follow actions? If I look in this launch box over here in the clip view of Ableton Live, I'm going to click on each of these different clips, and you might notice a couple of settings change from clip to clip. One of the settings that changes is the numbers under the section called follow action. And just so everyone also knows, one really useful thing that I have up in Live at the moment is something called Info View. And Info View is this window on the lower left-hand side of Live. And sometimes people forget that also, but Info View is great because anything that you hover over in Live, you'll be able to get information from Info View. So I know that we had a couple of questions in the YouTube chat that were a little bit more fundamental in that sense. Info View is something that might be able to help you out with that if you ever need to figure something out. We also had a question from someone specifically about using push and a strange red box that appears over a selection of clips if you're using push. And that's something that appears because you're using push. So it's not a glitch. You are meant to see that, and it's just demarcating what 8x8 grid of clips you are seeing in Live that's also showing up on push correspondingly. So you'll be able to change that grid depending on where your push layout is set to. But back to launch settings and follow actions. Now, what exactly is a follow action? Like I said, it defines a certain behavior of a clip. So there are a couple of different follow actions that start off in Ableton Live, and I think things will become a bit clearer when I start showing you examples. So let's, in a way, dive into this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to play a specific clip for you in Ableton Live, and then I'm going to select a couple of these other clips below it. So I'm going to play the very first clip over here. That's a very standard acid house type of beat in a way. I'm also going to recolor this clip for now so that we have a clearer view of it. I'm going to right click on this clip and choose it a different color, choose a different color for it, maybe make it pink. So I'm going to play the pink clip, and every so often now and then I'm going to select one of these other orange clips. So let's take a listen. Let's also increase the tempo. Right now we're at 80 BPM. Let's make this more housey. Maybe 127. Cool, and we'll take a pause there, but I'll just explain exactly what was happening. So I had this loop playing, this pink loop, and every now and then I was pressing one of these orange clips, and it seemed to deviate for a second, play this clip for a short moment, and then go back to this original pink loop that I had. And what I essentially had to do this was to change the follow actions of these 4 clips. So let's take a look and take a little bit of a deeper dive into, say, one of these very first clips over here. You'll notice that under follow actions, in this drop-down menu, I have something else selected other than something that's blank. So usually by default, when you have an audio clip up in Ableton Live, there will not be a standard follow action for it. So let's say if I hit it back over to my pink clip, you'll notice that right now under the follow actions section of my launch box, my launch settings, there's nothing underneath here in either of these drop-down menus. But if I hit back over to my house clip, my very first orange clip, there is something in this launch box, and this is a setting that's called first. What this means is that after a certain duration of time that I, the producer or performer, gets to define, this particular clip is going to automatically have the first clip in that section play. So in this sense, I've actually just set up for myself here a very simple improvisatory kind of environment for myself, experimenting with different kinds of combinations of drums and fills in a certain sense. So for example, I could be grooving along to this acid house beat in my live set or in a particular performance that I'm doing. And I'm a live electronic music performer, so I often do a lot of things in session view as well, similar to Isaac as well. So let's say I have this playing. But maybe I want to change things up a bit and throw in a little bit of a fill. So let's see what happens if I press on one of these other clips at a certain point in time. And we're kind of back in our loop. So it's almost as if I'm filling in for myself. And how am I actually doing that? Like I said, that's because I have this follow action here at the moment set up to play the first clip. This means every time that I play any of these other little orange clips, they're going to automatically play for a set duration that I have them play for, and then play back the first clip in this stack of clips that I have. And in this way, I can end up creating a lot of different kinds of drum fills. I could even add in some other kinds of clips, maybe an alternate type of clip. So let's do this together. Maybe I could select some kind of other house type of beat. So in my browser in Live, which I have open here, I'm just going to type in house BPM. Oh, whoops. Oh, dear. Goodness, Live has detected an internal error. This is the first time I've actually seen this happen. So I'm going to take a screenshot of it, everybody. Amazing. And send this off. But that's all right. Let's not use that. And let's head back over to our drum beats. And let's actually just make a duplicate of this house track. I'm going to do that by holding down Option, clicking and dragging. And I'm going to drag this all the way to the bottom over here. I'm also going to recolor it, maybe this pink over here. And instead of setting its follow action to play the first clip, I'm going to set its follow action to play any clip. And I'm also going to set this follow action to play after a certain duration of time. So for example, in all of these other orange clips that I have here, you'll notice that underneath my follow action menu, I have this little button over here, or this box rather, that has the number 2 in it. And this number 2 means that after every 2 beats, that is when the follow action will take place. So after 2 beats of me having some kind of interesting drum fill, then I'm going to play the first clip in this particular chain of group of tracks. So for this last house clip, let's change things up a bit. Instead of the follow action happening after 2 beats, let's make it 1 bar. 1 bar consists of 4 beats. So I'm going to type in the number 1 into the first box, and then you'll notice that the second number automatically snaps to 0 to accommodate for that 1 bar. And we'll make the first follow action box be any, but we'll also make the second follow action box be something else. And maybe for this one, let's see if we can try previous. So this means that there's a chance that the previous clip in this particular group of clips with follow actions might get triggered again. And now we need to make a little bit of a decision about probability. And this is kind of what Isaac was also alluding to when he described a lot of the things that he was doing to optimize his live performance setup. So when we think about probability in terms of this particular launch box that we have over here, it's really about ratios. So we're thinking about the chance of this first follow action happening in comparison to the second follow action. So let's see what happens if we set this up for maybe something that's even 50-50. So 1 is to 1. And now let's see what happens. Or maybe let's do something a little more different. Let's do 2 is to 3. So throw things a little bit more skewed into the previous clip of it. We'll also change this clip's launch quantization to maybe something a little bit more larger. Maybe let's do 1 bar. And just to clarify also, launch quantization refers to when that clip is going to play. So previously this was set up as a quarter note conforming to 1 beat in Ableton Live at a time. We can usually set this to 1 bar or global if we want it to be a little bit more generic and a bit more conducive to default settings in Live. So let's see what happens now. I'm gonna bring up the volume of this track and let's play around a bit and maybe make some observations about follow actions. So you might kind of have noticed like all of these little playing arrows jumping around. And anytime that you do have a follow action set in place, the clip that will play next will blink will have its play button blink. So for example, you see where that's going back to. Going back to the first clip. So that's really one interesting way of using follow actions. You can set up for yourself an improvisatory kind of environment for this. Now, something else that maybe follow actions might appeal to for a lot of our folks in watching, who I believe are also songwriters and more linear producers as well, less of an improvisatory kind of setting, is the usage of follow actions in a live performance. So I'm going to share a video very briefly of an example of how I personally use follow actions in some of my live sets. This is a video that's on the 343 Labs YouTube channel, and it's of me. There's me. Huh? My name's Daltrick when I do live electronic performances. And in this very first section of this particular performance that I'm doing of a tune called Skylark, if there are any other jazz heads out there, in this first section, I'm using follow actions to help me transition from section to section. So let's listen to this excerpt of Skylark. I'm also going to share my audio with everybody again. There we go. Hopefully this plays. Oh dear, it's not. So please bear with me, everybody. Thanks for your patience. Appreciate it. Skylark, have you anything to say to me? Won't you tell me where my love can be? Is there a meadow in the mist where someone's waiting to be kissed? Skylark. pause there, but basically what you might have noticed is that there are different sections of this particular performance where I'm playing different chord progressions. And how exactly am I doing that? I'm mostly playing the push for this, and I'm playing some kind of chordal part to assist me with the harmonic content of this performance, especially when I start getting a little bit more in depth into a lot of this. So let's take another quick listen. I don't know if you can find these things, but my heart is riding on your wings. So if we see them anywhere, won't you take me there? I started like doing a lot of button pushing and manipulating on push itself. And that's because I have follow actions to help me out with that. So I'm not so concerned with launching clips, which is oftentimes a focus of a lot of live performances that involve session view. And I'm going to show you how I did that. So let's head back over into live over here. And what I was trying to do with Skylark was to set up the bass part such that I'd be able to have the bass section roll through everything, and I only have to play the chord part on top of it. And this is exactly what it looks like. If we come over here to the bass section, I'm going to zoom in on one of these bass clips. And look, there's my follow action. The follow action is saying after 2 bars of playing this particular clip, which was only 2 bars long, we're then going to play the next clip, and it's always going to happen. It's a 1 to 0 probability. So for example, if I were to play this clip over here, it's going to play out for 8 bars in this case, and then it's going to play the next one, and you can immediately see the next clip also ready to launch after that. If I play this clip, instead of 8 bars, it's 7 bars, but it's going to play automatically the next clip, which is also lighting up and ready to launch right now. And then now we're playing the dark blue clip. So that's one way that you can use follow actions as well in a more organized type of linear performance, if you will. Well, not so much linear in this case since I was still looping stuff, but I had a very clear idea of when I wanted to transition from one section to another. And in this case, follow actions were really helping me make my performance one where I would have to worry less about all of the 500 things going on and instead focus more of my attention onto actually performing and dedicating more of my soul to the music, if you will. That's one way that you can use follow actions. And another way of using follow actions, which also relates to something that Ricky was talking about was with a Max for Live device that I was using in particular. So one thing that I do for a lot of my live sets is sometimes I end up doing a lot of loops, layering things on, and then I have some way of ending my sets out. So in this particular instance, I like everybody to focus on the play and the stop button. I'm going to play a couple of clips for you, but at all times, try to focus your attention on the play and stop buttons and see what happens. You might see me circling over something. Haha, so what exactly did I just do? I used a combination of a couple of things, one of them being follow action. So what I often do for a lot of my live sets, like I said, since I play from session view, I end up doing this a little bit of a hack around to not only stop clips themselves, but even stop the transport. So this is a little bit deeper for maybe our Max for Live friends or our friends who are familiar with MIDI mapping. But there's a really great Max for Live device called the MIDI Mapper 2.2, which is available on maxforlive.com for free, and big thanks to the creators who put this out. But what this lets you do is it lets you map certain MIDI notes to certain functions in Ableton Live. So what I'm actually doing over here is that I've got, first of all, I'm going to close this up, but I've got this empty clip that I use to stop all of my scenes when I'm having like all of my loops going and I want to stop all of my clips. But I have it set to a follow action of after 4 bars, it's going to play the next clip, which is this clip. Well, what is this clip? This clip contains a singular note that's a very quick pulse, and it's a G8, which is probably like the highest possible note that you can have in MIDI. I believe it is 127 actually. And what this is doing is that this particular button over here, this MIDI note that's being sent out, I've MIDI mapped it to the stop button. So this way, anytime that I want to stop my live set after I've done a series of, looping things, I just have to launch this particular clip in the end scene or launch the empty scene. And after a set amount of time, I know that transport is eventually going to stop. It's not going to stop immediately, so that way I can still have the tail of my reverb fade off, and then boom, there's the stop button. So that's another way that you might be able to use a combination of follow actions as well as MIDI mapping. And also, I'm going to try and be a little bit mindful of time here, but that's one way that you can use it in a more linear type of sense. And that was an example of a tune of mine called Skylark. It was a remix of the original Skylark tune by Johnny Mercer and Hoagie Carmichael. So I'm a big fan of flipping some jazz stuff. But another way that you can do this is to work on clip variations. So I like to share another song of mine. This one is called Throwaway, and I'm going to navigate there through Push as well. But in Throwaway, I have a version of this I do live that also involves follow actions, but in a little bit of a different type of sense. And I've purposefully not programmed them in yet, but let's see if we can do it together. So over here, I've got a set of clips that I like to play at 160 BPM. So they're all playing. And then I get to this section of the song. This section this is a little bit of a practice type of thing, but let's see if we can make this particular section play for a certain duration and then stop on its own. All I would have to do is I would have to click on this very first clip over here. If I want to select a group of clips, I can hold down Shift and I can scroll over to the last clip, and now each of these clips is selected. Great thing about this is that I can change all of their launch settings at the same time, which is awesome. So what I'm going to have them do is after 16 bars, we'll have them stop. Except for, I believe it's 2 of these clips. Yeah, for 2 of these clips, after 16 bars, instead of having them stop, we'll have them play the next clip. So the first clip is going to be this one over here, this riser white clip. And then the second clip is going to be this EP face plant clip. So I'm going to select these 2 clips by holding down Command, and that way I've selected only 2 clips. And Live is also telling me about this. It's saying 2 clips of different types in the 2 tracks are selected. Great, that's exactly what I want to know. But instead of having them stop, they're going to play next. So next, there we go. And then we're just going to check these 2 clips over here. And now I don't have to have any specific follow action settings for these, because what I've done is I've actually turned their loops off, so they're just going to end up sending out one shots and just going to play as one shots. So let's see if we can listen to these together. I'm also going to decrease the volume so that you can hear me about it, over it. But you'll also notice that these actions are being reflected in Live itself, which is great. I'm able to tell which clips are about to stop from any of the flashing square buttons, and also which ones are able to play next. So here we go. Here's the transition. And then we have a couple of other clips over there. So that's another way that you can use follow actions to get through different sections of your song. So that's a really great method of using these things maybe in a more practical sense. But the last thing I like to share with everybody is maybe a bit more of a slightly unconventional type of sense of using follow actions. And I don't know if anyone's, I'm sure we're all like Ableton fans, that's why we're here, obviously. But I don't know if anyone's paid attention to the One Thing series. This is something that when I share this next technique that I'm going to share, when I share it with my students or other friends, I always joke that this is my one thing if Ableton ever got me to do like a one thing type of video. One thing that Daltrick likes to do as far as performing goes and creating interesting types of melodies goes is experiment a little bit with the different ways follow actions can help you create different clips. So what I have over here are different clips of me singing certain things. However, I have all of their follow actions set in a pretty interesting manner. So I have most of these clips set to a follow action of after every one beat, it's going to play another clip. So some kind of other clip other than itself. So let's see what happens if I launch this very first clip and maybe we'll make a couple of observations. So I'm going to start with the volume a little bit lower too. So I'm just going to make sure all of our clips are stopped, and let's try this again. Take me through the wall. Take me through the wall. Take me through the wall. So what I've basically set up here is, in a way, a kind of infinitely looping type of signal chain for myself. And what I've done in these particular cases also is that I've played with the pitch of each of these different kinds of settings. And what this does is it kind of gives me a little bit of an opportunity to play a lot with vocal chops. So this is my vocal chopping technique. If anyone is interested in vocal chopping techniques, I know it's really hip now in music. All of the kids that I teach love it. So this is how Miss Claire does her vocal chops, if anyone's watching, any one of my kids. The idea, though, is that you're basically you're using the power of live to help you be creative. It's one thing to try to, think of your own ideas and think of implementing them. But since we have these tools, why not use them to our advantage? Why not use the randomness that live can give you to start creating some new patterns? Another way that you can work very interestingly with follow actions is the use of something called legato. And setting a clip to legato, this is also in the launch settings also, but setting a clip to legato will mean that the next clip that plays after it is going to continue on from its stopping point. So this can even give you more variation. Let's listen to all of these clips now without legato on for all of them, and then we'll listen to it with legato on. So here's legato off. So now let's switch all of these to legato. I'm going to select the very first clip, press shift on my computer keyboard and select the last clip. And now I'm going to turn on legato for all of them. And you see the legato switch light up as well. So let's take a listen now. Take me through the way, don't time. So that's an example. You'll notice that the variations are a little bit different, maybe even different emotionally because of the variation. So that ends up being something really cool to be able to experiment with. And the great thing that you can do after that is record it into, say, a separate track or even into a different drum rack. And then you can start playing around with all of these different things, all thanks to follow actions. So yeah, that's probably the last thing I wanted to share about follow actions and how creative you can potentially be with a lot of them. It's such an overlooked side of live, I think. It's funny because oftentimes not a lot of people know follow actions to begin with, but then we kind of ask ourselves the questions like, okay, how do we use follow actions? And there's really tons of really cool ways that you can use them. The one thing, Daltric's one thing is definitely a bit of a weird one, so I apologize if that was a little bit too out of the box. But I think it just goes to show how if you do know live and if you do know the different features of live, you can really travel very far with a lot of them in your music making process. So thanks so much, everyone, for tuning in. I'm going to check out if we do have questions and a couple of other things. But I think we have a question from Isaac in the chat. Thanks, Isaac. Let's see what we have. I need to move some of these windows out of the way. Sorry, everyone. Oh, cool. Yeah. So Isaac's question was, what do you recommend when you want to play multiple songs in one live session while keeping your CPU load as low as possible? That's a really great question, Isaac. I think it's one that I still consistently struggle with. I think the biggest thing that I found that is helpful is really just to be as organized as possible and not have two things. So not have any tracks there that you're not using. So for example, like if I start off an empty set with like 10 audio tracks but only end up using 4, then I'm going to delete the remaining 6 so that I keep those free. Another thing that I often do is I try to be very conscious of when I'm using my audio interface, what outputs and inputs are active. So for example, let's see if I can demonstrate this very quickly for everybody in depth into this. So I'm going to share with you my live preferences right now. And maybe this is a menu that some people might be familiar with, but if you're using an audio interface with Live, you are able to configure your channels in the preferences under the audio tab. So let's take a look at my inputs. So right now I have you'll notice, interestingly enough, I only have my mono inputs enabled and I don't have my stereo inputs enabled. So this also does help with CPU a little bit, especially if you're working with an interface that has like 10 inputs, like my Keith Macmillan K-Mix over here is one of those. But usually any input that you have active is still being there to receive audio, and it's kind of preparing it in a way. And yeah, it even says here, choose which audio hardware inputs to make available, and deactivating inputs reduces the CPU load. So that's one thing I try to be aware of too. Another kind of side thing that's maybe less of a live thing and more of just an overall thing dealing with your computer and stuff is I try to leave as much space on my computer available as possible. So now if you look into if I were to pull up my Mac like storage for now, for example, I have I think almost 40% free out of my drive. Like some people they say usually 20% is the sweet spot for it, but I try to keep as much as possible free. And so far I found that it has helped with like how fast my computer goes and how reliable it is in live settings. So that's a lot of things to consider, but thanks for your question, Isa. I think it's something that I'm trying to figure out also in the process. So yeah, thanks. A couple of other questions. Oh yeah, David has a question. Cool. So that's a great question, David. So David was asking, what stands do we have our pushes on? So for me in particular, I have my stack on not my stack, my push on a stand that is unfortunately no longer in production. I'm sorry, David. I have it on a stand it's actually very old, but it's created by QuickLock. And the company itself is QuickLock. Unfortunately, the stand itself is no longer in production, but it's a specific type of stand it's actually a laptop stand, but it just kind of angles downwards or upwards depending on how you're oriented. And because of that, I'm able to have push at an angle. So that's my question. That's my answer. Sorry, not my question, but my answer. Cool. So yeah, let me just check out for a second if there are any questions in the YouTube place. Oh, great, no questions. Cool. Not great that there are no questions, but great that that things have been answered. Ooh, and Isak uses a guitar stand. That's awesome. Yeah, so lots of different options, I think. One thing that I've also seen people use pretty commonly is some kind of music stand, but not the flimsy ones, but really the solid, hard plastic ones that you can also tilt and that you can fasten. So I've seen people use that as well for push. So that might be an option too as well, David, if you're looking into that. But otherwise, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to let everyone be seen. Thanks so much, everybody, for tuning in to the May Ableton user group. Again, this user group was hosted by 343 Labs. We are a school in Manhattan. And we usually operate physically when we're not in quarantine. But for now, we're online. We have lots of great classes coming up. A couple of upcoming events that we have, and we host a lot of events on the regular. We have an upcoming event this Thursday that's going to be a live stream with Tetro and a DJ producer, Ming, who's a really great person, and they're going to talk about some music business stuff. So that's going to happen on Thursday with 343 Labs. And then we have a couple of other classes also just starting out. So oftentimes we teach a lot of Ableton Live classes, and 2 Ableton Live classes that we have coming up are one that's starting on May 16th. That's going to be a beginner online live class. And then we have an intermediate Ableton Live class starting on the 18th, which is a Monday. So you can find out more at 343labs.com. And I think Thomas is also going to put in some links in the chat on YouTube as well as here, or you can just head over to our website and there's lots of really great info there. But otherwise, thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. Really appreciate everyone being here. Thanks to everyone who joined in with us in Zoom. It was great to see everybody's faces in the chat as well. Otherwise, if everyone in Zoom wants to give a little wave, we'll sign up from our friends on YouTube. Thanks again to Isaac and Ricky, and we'll see you all next month. Bye.